Armed neo-Nazis and a leftist gun group went head-to-head outside an all-ages holiday drag show over the weekend, according to Dallas Morning News. This is just the most recent episode in a slew of confrontations stemming from anti-LGBTQ advocates.
The group Protect Texas Kids has been protesting drag shows across the state for the past 6 months in an effort to stop children from being allowed at these performances. And though they maintain no connection to the neo-Nazi group, about 10 members of the neo-Nazi Aryan Freedom Network showed up anyway. Members of the group and counter-protesters were strapped with the guns, but no arrests were made because nobody drew their weapons. I guess I would be interested to know more about what the non-Nazi participants in the protest did to, were they aware that the neo-Nazis were going to be there? Did they try to dissuade them from participating? Did they denounce them? Did they say, we want nothing to do with you? Or was it like a small group of people of which a substantial number were neo-Nazis? Do you know what I mean? Because it's not, look, if you have a giant protest, you're not necessarily, I don't think, responsible for every person every kooky person who wants to associate with your cause and is vile in every other way or something, that necessarily maligns you. The bigger a protest movement gets, the more that's bound to happen. That happens to the left as well, So I don't necessarily think the tactic here to condemn the entire opposition to this as de facto Nazi seems not necessarily true to me. But if you have 10 neo-Nazis show up and it was only, I don't know how many people were here, did you say, please go away, we want nothing to do with you? You should probably do that.
This ended up being an issue there was some Turning Points USA event, right? Where a bunch of Nazis showed up, and the argument that came from, liberals was, did you discourage? I mean, similar to what you're pointing out, did you discourage the Nazis? Why is it that it turns out at all your events Nazis show up, Nazis aren't showing up at my events? I mean, do you think there's anything to that? At a certain point, if there is a political project that a group like white supremacists, Nazis have glommed onto, so consistency, at what point, if any, is there an obligation to do some introspection about what? Well, but I mean, this happens.
They're kooky left. They're Nation of Islam or Black Hebrew Israelites groups showing up to.
I would argue they're not Nazis.
Okay, they're pretty crazy. I mean, they shout anti-Semitic things, anti-gay things, anti-women things.
I'm sorry, but tell me specifically which left event are Nation of Islam people showing up in solidarity?
The Women's March?
Wait, who stood up at the Women's March?
The Nation of Islam, didn't they?
No, the argument that was being made, that was one of the women who headed the Women's March had a good relationship with Louis Farrakhan. That wasn't a Louis Farrakhan event. It wasn't a Nation of Islam.
I mean, there were like 1 million people there. I can't imagine there was no problematic person in the crowd.
Well, but that's not the question. The question is, at this point, and you said this, if there is an event where there is very few of the people who are ostensibly there to protest the actual event, and there seem to be a not incidental number of armed Nazis, at what point is there an obligation for the people who are holding this event to say, don't be here? I'm asking you. I'm not saying anything.
Well, that's what I'm saying, is that if I were spending my time organizing opposition to drag brunches, I mean, I would question my life choices, but also I would make sure that the Nazis coming also to protest this cause did not feel welcome. That's how I would organize it, but I'm not an expert in this.
Especially since the whole reason for everybody being here is ostensibly because they care so much about children. It's not clear to me that children are benefited by the presence of armed Nazis. I can't believe I sit here and I say sentences like that, they should have to be said out loud, but this is the country that we live in, where there are a lot of people.
Everyone has the right to be armed.
Who defends not the right, but the wisdom as a society of having armed confrontations at an event, that you are there to protest because you think that the safety of children is on the line.
But it seems like there were protesters, there were counter-protesters, people were armed, but nothing bad happened, and that's how it should happen.
But we are also talking about this weeks after a shooting at a drag club, an all-ages drag event, in which 5 people were killed by someone who had this ideology of thinking, we got to keep people safe from the drag club, so I'm going to go shoot a bunch of people up. And, it's not anybody else's fault of what that shooter did, and we can sit here all day and night and say that nobody has any responsibility for anything, and that's fine. I mean, I'm not arguing with anybody. If that's how you feel, that's how you feel. All I'm going to do is describe what happened. What happened is that there were armed Nazis outside of this all-ages drag club because they were there in the interest, ostensibly, of keeping kids safe. That is the world that we live in. Take it or leave it.
What is your point?
I don't know. If that sounds good to you, that sounds good to you. If that sounds bad to you, that sounds bad to you. But I'm not going to be in this position. I'm a little frustrated being in this position of if you say the obvious thing that armed Nazis are bad, you're like a lib or something. Like you're somehow some kind of extremist that wants to, I don't know. It's like such a bizarre upside down universe we live in.
Angling for your CNN gig yet again.
Oh my God, Briahna betrays her ideals and says armed Nazis are a bad thing.
Well, then you put me in the position. I'm trying to say that armed Nazis are not bad. They are, but also nothing bad happened because
thank goodness.
Most people, even kooky people, don't do anything bad.
Well, thank goodness. But look, there have been a number of these altercations all across the country. New York City Council member Eric Botcher just posted a video this morning, early this morning, of what he represents, and who knows the accuracy of this, but what he represents to be a video of the drag story hour protesters physically attacking one of his neighbors the night before. And again, it's a scuffle. Who knows who started it? I'm not trying to make any strong claims about the origin story there, but it seems clear that these events have become focuses of violent confrontations across the country, some of which are deadly, that resulted in the murder of participants at Club Q, murders that were only thwarted by a heroic attendee of said event, who was apparently a bad guy for bringing his child to this event. And, I think people need to take a good long look in the mirror about whose interests are actually being protected as they show up to these kinds of events looking for a fight.
Yeah, and again, the controversy is over. I don't think the proper controversy is over just like children being exposed to men dressed up as women, but it's the concern that many conservatives have is about children being exposed to sexual content, and the stripping aspect of it. Some of these videos we've seen it's sexual in nature and children are around. Now, again, my solution to this is you parent your kids how you see fit. If you don't think that's appropriate for your kids, I think that's totally fine call to make. I don't really see much reason for the state to be deciding this, or even, everyone has the right to protest whatever they want. It wouldn't get me out on a Sunday, but...
At what point does you have the right to protest whenever you want, butt up against my right to go to a drag show without fearing for my life? Like
they don't... What?
Someone murdered folks at Club Q, which infringes on their right to attend a drag show of their choice. So
you have the right not to be murdered.
Right, and I think I also have a right not to be intimidated by someone standing outside of the door with a machine gun.
They can't stop you from going in. Well, they can't stop you from going in. They can't block the way. I mean, these are very well adjudicated.
Yeah, that is fine, but you can't. I'm sorry. What the law permits and what is kind of morally responsible, especially if you're looking out for the interests of kids, are not necessarily the same thing.
Okay, from a morally responsible standpoint, everybody mind your own business.
Right.
That's a perfectly good rule.
Right.
Like this, it's not. And also, if you're so concerned, I think I've said this before, if you're so concerned about children being exposed to sexual content, like you have to deal with, and I'm not even saying I would necessarily agree with laws designed to combat this, because I think they have other issues, but you would have to grapple with like the easy and widespread access to online pornography, which is by far the way 99.9% of underage people encounter sexual material. It's not because they got taken to a drag brunch that has happened that affects a small number of people compared to the millions and millions of children who at an early age encounter sexual material online. So if you're very worried about that, check out, be responsible with your children's access to smartphones and laptops and what they're allowed to consume when they go to friends' houses, things like that. Probably they're still going to find a way around it, but that's what you should be worried about. Not
and I also just recommend that everybody Google kids at Hooters. Just Google kids at Hooters. And if you want to put together a group of folks to go stand with AK-47s or AR-15s, whatever it is, outside of Hooters restaurants to make sure that parents don't subject their kids to that horrible, sexually explicit environment, then that would be at least ideologically consistent.
I have more to say. We should get into this. I think we'll be talking about this again.
Yeah.
So. Tomorrow on Rising, we have another amazing show planned for you. We will be covering the most important stories of the day.
Be sure to like, share, and subscribe so you never miss any content. And for those of you who like to listen while on the go, we are now available anywhere you listen to podcasts.
All right, take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.